Trader685, 7th of November, 14:20 Dubai time. Just a quick update on the PDF I sent out the other day. You can see that, if you haven't got this, see that at trader685.substack.com. And it's basically my prime setups that I'm watching and just see how these are progressing. Nothing on this video is financial advice, educational and entertainment purposes only. Please do your own due diligence as always. Okay, so let's just take a quick look. Indexes had a bit of a nasty fall in the Qs yesterday in the general markets, but there's two gaps that have basically been closed here. Also, there is an uptrend line depending on how you draw this. Let's see what we get today. There were a few of the leaders, Robinhood, Palantir, that were down like 6 to 10% yesterday. So this is, not too good, I would say. Let's look at some of the other major stocks as well, just to get an idea. Look at Microsoft here, again, coming to the bottom of this kind of sort of channel here. NVDA was also weak yesterday as well, down about 4%. Getting close to its 50-day moving average. Let's see if it gets support there. Some of the other strong stocks that were on the PDF, two that I highlighted were two of my favorite plays. I'll just put this out here. Two of my favorite plays, AMD and Micron. AMD actually did have a significant drop, well, a decent drop of 6% yesterday. Then Micron, still unstoppable, was up yesterday as well. But let's see if that does have any crack and gives another entry point, or whether it carries on holding. So let's just go through the setups, what we highlighted. HRI. What we're trying to do here, just for a reminder, what we're trying to do here with all of this whole exercise is find the next Robinhood. Sorry, that is Palantir. Let's bring Robinhood up. Let's find the next Robinhood. Okay, as I tell people, this is the best chart I think I've ever seen. Maybe the Solana chart rivals this, but in equities, this is probably one of the best. This is the best chart I've ever seen. This is the holy grail. This is what we're looking for. This is how you create multi-100% winners. These are not small cap stocks. They're usually in plain sight, and it's usually where a stock has gone through a complete restructuring of the business model and the company itself, and has now got a new narrative and a new growth trajectory that basically carries it for multiple quarters. And you want to capture huge winners like this. In my view, this is the way to create real wealth. If you look at another example as well, again, what we're looking for, Palantir, again, a very similar chart, formed a low, then formed bases, and then had a huge move. You can just examine this Robinhood chart. It is worth examining. You've got a very even base here. This is your first entry point. Then there's another entry point, which was a bit more difficult because it did actually come back and test it. But essentially, this was a structural breakout, which led to this enormous move. There are other examples around which didn't do as well, but still did very decent moves that have a similar kind of formation. Roblox was one. You can see the base here. Again, look at where it started. It started with a gap up opening. Okay. And that, on that day, that would have been it was a 20% move up. That would have scared most people. Most people won't enter there, but that is often the start of a secular type move. So these gap ups are very good indicators. And this is kind of a lot of the things that we're looking for, as well as structural breakouts, right? And then we're monitoring these to see if a constant bid comes in from institutions. Usually when you get a gap up, it means institutions are not positioned. Something has happened that people were not expecting, and there is a scramble to buy that stock. So you can see with Roblox, there's a move up here, and then it goes up, but it never actually comes back and closes this base, because back here, institutions were buying. And then this had an initial move from here to here of about 50%, came back, and then its whole move, even if you bought at the top of this breakout till up here, was 158%. You've just got to hold it, and it was across about, this took about 9 to 10 months to basically play out. You have that position on indecent sizing and change your portfolio kind of thing. This is the kind of thing that I'm looking for, and how to spot these things early, because obviously you don't want to be buying it up here. You want to be buying it down here. Right, so let's take a look at HRI. And often I also find as well, looking at the 3-day or weekly chart clears out all the daily noise and helps you assess a stock much better. Right, so let's just pin that there. Okay, so this company is basically a specialty rentals in sort of capital equipment, and it wants to ride mega project demand in AI data center and AE and LNG support construction as well. So, we've got a decent base forming here. Stock price is tightening up. This can kind of go into a consolidation around here and then break out. But let's see, it's on the watch list, right? What was next on our list? Let's just go down the PDF here. Now, this is actually a crypto. I will mention a few cryptos because, I tend to trade both. The problem with crypto that it gives a lot of false breakouts, and unfortunately, this seems to be one of them, and it's come back, but it's worth keeping an eye on. See if it gets support and then has another go to move up. Then this was disappointing, but unfortunately that is the nature of crypto. These things do happen. Right, this is another one of my favorites. This is DigitalOcean. They basically rent out data center space, then resell that space and service added services to small businesses, etc. They've got a new CEO. There's a lot happening in this company. His results were very good. It was up 18%. And again, you can see this kind of basing pattern. The indication is actually given down here that something is happening. So this is where, if you're early, you can start to put this on your radar. This is probably where initial institutional accumulation took place. You see tight price action here, where there's a buyer active, moves up, consolidation, then it has the breakout here. So again, this is going to get on the radar. This will get on the radar of a lot of institutions. This is playing into a big theme as well, with small businesses basically adopting AI, and this company is effectively giving out that AI. The CEO's got a pretty good track record as well. I'll maybe post probably some research on the Twitter about what he's done in the past. But again, this is one of those starting moves. You keep an eye on this thing, on pullbacks. Let's just see the daily here on the bottom chart. See, had to move up. Now, does this pull back? Does it tighten up? Do you see buyers coming in? This is, again, one to put on the radar. This is how these moves start. That's why it's important to put them on the watch list. Okay, large cap stock, Amazon. And, in future editions, I will order this a bit better. This was a first stab at this. So please excuse me. Again, Amazon, mega cap. You can see here, this hasn't really participated in this AI boom, but it's very possible that Amazon haven't spent all this money, but they're now going to use what the other companies have created, as well as their own robotics, automation. And also the stock sits at an intersection between AI, cloud, logistics, e-commerce, data centers, entertainment, Amazon Prime, and also ads. So it's got multi-pronged kind of catalysts that can happen here. Again, a stock, which is a staple in a lot of portfolios. But look, we had this gap up after its earnings, then it's come back down, it's coming back into the gap. Now let's see if this gap holds. This consolidates and starts to move higher. This can become a secular play, albeit slower than some of the more high octane names, but worth keeping an eye on. LYFT, again, this is a ride sharing company, very similar, the same category as Uber. Now, what's happening here? They've got a good network, etc. Now, does autonomous driving or a larger player simply buy this out, for its network to basically roll out autonomous vehicles? Let's see. But again, you see the basing pattern and you see a big move up here. So there's a repricing in the stock. Now, let's see how this consolidates. You can see a tight area here. This is accumulation. You can see on these moves down, there's large volume, which has no follow through, which suggests buyers are sitting down at these levels. But yeah, let's see how this progresses. Again, it's a candidate. These are all candidates. We're trying to figure out, which ones become real candidates for this move. There's no, You know, there's no crystal ball, unfortunately. We look for the signs, then we see what shapes up. Again, this one path. This is agentic AI. So again, had a really nice move out of this kind of base here. Had really strong volume on it. Has come back a bit. I'm not sure what this selling here was. It feels like a big player was a forced seller on Tuesday, which is a pretty brutal day. This happens to pod shops sometimes. You know, they have very strict risk limits, and they've got a large position on equities. They're forced to dump it in one day. There was a bit of follow through the next day. It's now at 50-day moving average. Maybe it closes this gap today. Let's see how it actually reacts. But, you know, I've got a decent position in this. Let's see if this can hold up and start to move higher, right? Again, if it doesn't, then I'll cut it. But it's a candidate that this can even out in this area and become, you know, a really big mover if it can find its footing. And again, it's Meta. This is agentic desktop AI helping in robotic process automation on desktops, easy installation. They've got a lot of partnerships. You know, this is one of those ones that can turn into something potentially. It's got to prove itself. Let's see. NTGR, again, this is actually quite a small cap stock, but everybody will know it sells your home routers. You know, again, has got this kind of, it's got a base here. It's involved in sort of, you know, larger scale networking as well. But yeah, let's see. It's had a strong move. This stock is pretty volatile and it's not that liquid, right? It's under $1 billion market cap as well. Let's see if it can find its footing. If it can build a base here, then it can move up, right? And this thing can move quite quickly. So just be careful of that. This was flagged to me by somebody in my network, right? I hadn't looked at this stock before, but Axtron is linked to ASML. And again, its results came out the other day, and you can see that there was, you know, you can see the base here has broken out. Now let's see if it can hold up. Holding up means the institutional buyers come in. Does it hold this base and then move out like this? Again, one to have on the radar. So this is Porsche. Now again, this is pretty interesting, right? This is a very well-known brand, S-tier brand up there with Louis Vuitton, you know, Ferrari, etc. Globally renowned. You can see this base forming here. They're having a new CEO in 2026, moving away from electric vehicles, leaning into their more combustion engine. They've got a few other changes going on as well. It's worth reading up on the company. Again, you know, this is how these big moves start. Let's see if it can get back above the sort of 48.50 level and, you know, find its footing. You know, does this become the next race, basically, right? You can see what Ferrari did. You know, they're not making cars, they're making art, right? Is their kind of moniker. This was the IPO down here in January 15. Look at this move. This is a secular move. You catch one of these, this is a 10x move, right? You know, with multiple re-entry opportunities. You know, it's just a secular move. I mean, I don't know if Porsche can do something like this, but, you know, even if it does 100% or something, right? It is worth keeping an eye on. Right, and this is something that institutions will buy, that will be being pitched by brokers. You know, it's something that, you know, is worth keeping an eye on. This is a pretty nice base as well. Look, there's a big block trade or big transaction in here. I have to actually find out what that was, but there is a, you know, potential institutional buyer here, maybe the family or something. There's more volume down here as well in this action. Like, this volume's only created by buyers. Right, people that are buying down at these levels. This is not created by, you know, retail buyers. This is created by institutional buyers. Right, then you've got a big move up here. This is probably around the announcement of the new CEO, etc. You know, something that's worth keeping an eye on. Right, this is how these things start. This is a bit of a smaller cap stock. Again, in that whole defense meta. You know, 500 mil market caps. You've got to be careful with these. Right, this is part of the Endural proxy trade. You know, does this find a footing here? Can this move up? You know, they've had some partnerships which they've done with some big European defense contractors. These guys make the micro LED screens for soldiers' helmets, etc. They got a new CEO. Again, something that's worth keeping an eye on, but it's lower caps. You can have bigger moves on the upside as well as the downside. You know, there was the other stock, which unfortunately was not on my radar because it's Canada listed, called Kraken Robotics. And just look at this move in this thing, right? Like you don't want to, you know, I don't want to be missing things like this. So you want to try and catch something like this early. You know, stick an examination here, tight price action, breakout. Doesn't really look like much, but look what this turns into, right? You know, this was a move over what, a couple of years, but it's probably a, what is that? Let's see, it's 10x move, right? A small position can become a huge position, right? So, you know, I'm not saying KOPN can do something like this, but you know, this has happened, and you know, big moves start from small beginnings, right? And that is kind of, we're looking for the clues, right? Then you got this trade Unity, you know, like this stock has had quite a lot of controversy, some management missteps, etc. You can read about the history of this, but this basically is creating, this is a gaming platform that is going to be used by augmented reality, VR designers, ultimately AI people using AI for content using AI to create content. They need to use a platform to actually create content, just rather than just creating it directly in you know, Grok or something, to create more longer form content, and also content for games as well. Competitor to this is Unreal Engine, which is owned by Epic Games. But again, something like this has got operational leverage, it's got network effects, they've got an ad network. You know, this is something that can really go, and this gets a monopolistic positioning, gets wide adoption, sort of for creating creating AI-based content, you know, and extra gaming content. Something like this can really have a flywheel. They have a monopolistic kind of effect, so they have pricing power. They have a lot of developers on their system. Like, this thing is, these are unique companies that are difficult to replicate, right? Again, you know, this move here, if you think about it, if you're trapped in this stock down here, this move here, it's a 100% move. If you want to sell, it's giving you the opportunity to sell, but it hasn't sold down. And now it's starting to move up, and, you know, a new narrative comes out here. This is how these things, you know, have these big types of moves. But, you know, again, watching them early. Right, this is actually my favorite stock at the moment. Now, since I sent this out, this was the pattern, and now look at it. This had a huge move after earnings. You know, 30% move, and it tells you that the market is, you know, wrong-footed on this. Although there's a huge amount of short covering, but I don't think that was the case. But, you know, this is a really big move, and it was bid all day, telling you that there's strong institutional demand. Now, luckily, had a weak day in the market that allowed a further entry, and maybe we get a bit more of a dip in this to get another entry. But, you know, something like this is, you know, reminiscent. Like, it's got through its congestion. You know, it's, look, you can see the base here had the initial breakout, and even this initial breakout was a big move. It's a 127% move. Found its footing, moved up more, had another leg up, get another consolidation. This is what you want to see. This is healthy, digestive price action. Then we've got this big breakout, and what I showed you earlier is that big moves can start from basically these what are called episodic pivots, basically usually on earnings or a huge announcement or strategic change or something like this. They can cause this initial move in the stock, which then gets digested and leads to a complete re-rating, narrative change, strategic change, whatever it is. This is kind of how these things play out. You know, this is a very interesting candidate, right? I want to build a bigger position in this, right? This is Lemonade. It's an AI insurance stock. Then you got ARM Holdings, right? All the other chip manufacturers have done really well. And look at this. You know, this is a SoftBank company, IPO'd, moved up, but it's essentially been in a range for about a year now, more than a year and a half. It's been essentially in a range. Now, do you think these guys are, you know, going to get in on the sort of, you know, chip contracts for the hyperscalers and for the AI companies? You know, this looks ripe, right, for something to happen here, right? It's not, I thought it would break out sooner, but it's consolidating. Keep an eye on it. Let's see if it can consolidate and then make another leg. You know, again, one to keep an eye on. DLOs, this is a Latin American payments platform. Someone sent me the fundamental write-up on this the other day. I've just got to go through it, but I have been through it before. A lot of people really like this company. I think it's a really high quality play on Latin America, play on payments, stable coins, all sorts of narratives are in this. And again, you can see base forming here. This is a consolidation. If anybody wanted to sell it, they have plenty of opportunity. It's not being sold. Now touch the bottom of the base. Do we get the range forming and do we move out? I mean, once a narrative on something like this gets going, it can have a quick move. It's just got to get out of this consolidation area. Again, something to keep. And look at this episodic pivot here. This was the big gap. Now, can this, maybe its earnings come out, it has another gap. Maybe that's the start of the move. But let's see. Let's keep an eye on it. Sphere. Everyone knows the Las Vegas Sphere. It used to be a big position of mine, but in all this chop, I've somehow lost this position. I'd love to re-enter this. Look at this gorgeous base here, post-IPO base. This is institutional due diligence, reconfiguring of people's positions. They've sorted all this out now, and now you get the breakout, and this usually leads to a markup of some sort. It's not pulling back, unfortunately. I really would like a pullback on this to get an entry, but this can turn into like, a big winner. Sometimes these IPO-based stocks often have the best moves, right? Let me just find one that made a really big move like this. Rubrik made one. Yeah, so look at this. So this is your institutional due diligence period after the IPO. Nothing kind of happens. This is institutions doing a due diligence, people who want to sell getting out of it, right? And then when it breaks out, it starts to have its move. This was if you got that on the breakout, this was sorry, 1 second. This was a, 136% move, not bad. You'd take that, right? Zillow, again, this is one of those ones that is a unique company consolidating the real estate industry, but unfortunately is at the mercy of sort of the home builders and the housing industry and mortgages, etc., which is not doing too well in the US at the moment. It's had its breakout, messy consolidation, but if housing basically comes back and transactions come back, interest rates go down, etc., this can have a really big move. This is a one-stop shop. They've improved their entire infrastructure, consolidation of both sides of the buying and selling, real estate tools, real estate agent tools. They've done a lot of stuff, and you get these kinds of unique companies. This is not a commoditized company, right? When this starts to get going and it's got network effects, etc., these kind of things can get going. But it's in a consolidation, but one to keep an eye on. Found this one on Twitter. Apparently, what they're doing is consolidating and changing their business into building edge infrastructure. Now let's see how this plays out. But this is an unknown company, 200 million market cap, so small caps, you've got to be careful. But again, it's got a nice uniform base. Large player might be looking at this, but this can execute if it can make profits and it's got decent execution. And some of these things can have really big moves, right? You can kind of see, this consolidation, whatever happened here is now being sorted out. This is 2018, so this is a long time this has been in a base. This company is reconfiguring. These kind of things can have big moves. What is it called? A DUOT Technologies Group. Okay, some comparisons here. I'll go into it here. Sometimes repeated patterns repeat over time, so you can look at how previous moves played out. So Palantir here, GLXY here. Now, obviously, GLXY is seen as a crypto stock, but it's got data center. It's got basically a crypto investment bank inside it. It's got huge amounts of crypto holdings. And, let's see if it can hold and find a footing. These crypto stocks are basically volatile, right? That is the sort of goes with the territory. But if something like this can get a hold, and if crypto starts to rally again, these things can have huge moves, right? But again, one to keep an eye on, right? But it's got Mike Novogratz at the helm. He's got lots of hedge fund friends. He's old, he's kind of, blue blood hedge fund type player. There's lots of levers that they can pull internally to make something like this move. All right, I went over AMD. You know, there is a chance, I think this is potentially the next NVIDIA. If you do compare these charts, you know, this is basically looks like NVIDIA in 2023, you know, before its breakout. But, you know, again, let's see, they're being very ambitious. They pulled off a big deal with OpenAI, who are going to be supporters and buyers of their chips. They're rolling out and now really trying to capture, you know, part of the AI data center market. And AI hyperscalers, you know, putting their chips into data centers. You know, again, we don't know how this is going to play out, but it's had a really good move. It's had its episodic pivot. It's had that big breakout here. I think this was on the OpenAI news. And now let's see how it consolidates and holds up. You know, there'll be big institutions that are haven't got enough weight of this, will be buying pullbacks. You know, this is not the type of thing that can just collapse. Right, so, you know, even if it gets back to the 50 DMA, undercuts this level here, it provides a very good entry, right? Micron is my favorite stock in the moment, right? You know, high bandwidth memory. There's only 3 players in the world that make this: SK Hynix, Samsung, and Micron. You know, this is an American company, got a bit of advantage, and everybody needs HBM. Everyone needs memory for all kinds of processors and chips. And you read about HBM memory, it's very difficult to make. Very few people can make it. You know, has this finally gone from a cyclical business into a secular business? I mean, this move would suggest there's some secularity around it. You know, I think they are sold out for a couple of years in advance, and people will be, you know, bidding for capacity into the future here. Now, let's see what they actually do and what actually happens here. But this is one of the strongest stocks in the market. Yesterday, the whole market sold off. This was unbudged. It's given no one an entry. You know, this is one of those ones that's a buy on dips. You know, you can trade around a core position with options, etc. This is a beauty. Then you got Tesla. You know, this is AI, robotics, data centers, chip processing, all kinds of other companies tied up in this, you know, this, and then you got the humanoid robotics metro in the background, right? Now, you know, held up very well yesterday, 3% down, you know, but this is tight here. It's correlated with Bitcoin to a certain extent as well. And one to keep an eye on, it's been in a range for like 2-3 years. I mean, if this breaks out on a new narrative, you know, these things can really go. Right. Let's look at some new candidates now as well. So just going through on FinViz on my other monitor here to take a quick look. Looking at weekly moves. You know, what's potentially strong, right? Datadog had results yesterday. Now, you know, look at this. You know, take a weekly chart. That is a breakout episodic pivot. Again, this goes on the list, right? Now, this can be the start of something big. Now, let's see, put an alert here. Let's see if we get a pullback today. You know, I need to read up on what exactly happened here. But again, that move suggests that the market is not positioned here, right? So you could have breakout above these kind of weekly levels here, you know. Down here, nice consolidation, then a breakout. You know, sometimes, you know, it's scary buying these things on such a big move up, and it was up 23% yesterday. But, you know, as you've seen, you know, often these don't come back. This can consolidate for a while and then move. Let's see what the actual repricing is. But Datadog goes on the list. Look at some other names here. Okay, there is this Teradyne Systems. Again, had this huge move again on its results. I mean, this chart isn't that clean, but there's definitely a couple of levels in here that have been respected, and there's a gap up, big gap up. You know, need to read up a bit more on what the narrative is here. But again, this is another one that goes on the list as a candidate. You know, this goes alongside Lemonade. These things can turn into big winners, right? But again, it's got to hold up. It's got to show that demand, and especially into a falling market, if it shows demand, that's usually a very positive sign. This is Coherent Corp. This is, this is all the optics and stuff inside data centers. Did quite a bit of work on these a while back, right? Got some research here. Yeah, again, one to keep an eye on. I don't like this as much. It's already had a big move. Let's see. On the list. Expedia Group, and this had results the other day. I need to read up on it. Let's see what's happening here. So this is actually something that is happening. Something that is happening after market. So just go to the 4-hour chart down here. You'll see the move. Yes, this is something that's happening today, right? And let's see if this holds. Again, worth keeping an eye on. Let's see what the narrative is there. There's a strategic change or not. This is how you find these things. Now, look, this is one that I don't. This is an example of one. This is kind of stuff I don't want to be missing. Look, this is SanDisk. Now, part of this whole exercise is for me to focus my own process as well, and you guys kind of benefit from this. But this is for me to focus my process, because all of my big winners have come from catching these types of moves, right? I don't want to be missing stuff like this. So this is a gorgeous move. Again, it's an example of the IPO breakout, right? I think this company was relisted. It's gone. It's had its due diligence range, and then it's broken out and it's just gone, right? Again, supplying memory to data centers. It's a 300% move, right? You gave one re-entry basically here, maybe another one there, but it had multiple, gorgeous moves up. You catch that here, and you can just ride it, set your stop loss down here and just ride it up, right? I don't want to be missing things like this. This is an example of why we do this exercise, because at this stage, you couldn't tell, what this was going to look like, right? You can't tell what this is going to look like, right, on this breakout, right? And then you play it forward a bit. Hang on, why isn't this working? And you play it forward a bit, and this is what it kind of becomes, right? You want to be, this is why we try and catch these types of things. Okay, so let's look at another one. STX is another one. All right, again, bit messy, right? But has had a very big move. This would be more difficult for me to catch. This has not got a base. It's got a momentum-led move. This is more difficult. It's not as clean. Let's see what else we've got. Lilly. A few people were mentioning this today. Again, had decent results. Again, this stock has had a huge move for the GLP-1 narrative. Then it's consolidated, for like over a year now. And now is it getting a second leg? Can it do something really big here? Again, want to put on the radar. I don't like it as much, but it's a continuation move, but it can be a grinder. Some of these things just carry on moving up. Now, energy names are coming up. This name keeps coming up, by different people. EQT. Again, energy names are having, they have got decent charts. Now, I looked through all the charts this morning. Energy names were some of the only ones that actually had decent charts, and you can kind of see that these are holding up well. Now, this is what is starting to happen, is that the energy demand from data centers, I think, is the next trade. And you're starting to see solar move first. You've seen battery stocks move, right? You're starting to see natural gas move. This is a trade that is brewing, right? This is kind of where we want to look as well. Now, where does this trade kind of come from? This is Antero Resources' favorite stock in data centers. In natural gas. I've traded this before for like a huge move up here. But when this stock gets a footing and natural gas prices start to stabilize, these kind of things can have really big moves. Commodity stocks are difficult, right? You've got to be pretty careful. But if you get a secular sector-based move, then you want to try and find the fastest horses. What else have you got here? Just checking. Nothing else is really standing out. But yeah, those are some to add to our process, basically, right? Look, thanks very much. Thanks very much for listening. And this is probably my first one of these. It's gone on a bit longer. But yeah, happy trading. As I said, nothing is financial advice, entertainment purposes only. A lot of this is for my own process solidification. Cheers.